Hello everyone, and here we are at the Red Bull Ring. As you probably can tell, it's not exactly the weather that I was hoping for. It is raining. Hopefully we'll be able to get a couple of laps on the track. Well, I think I do have an hour in the driving center, so it's going to be split by an hour on the track in the driving center, and then later, if the weather actually gets a little bit better, we'll be able to actually get on the real circuit and try out the car. So today I'll be driving an Expo. Well, I think this is going to be the most interesting car that I've ever driven, but hopefully, as I said before, the rain is going to come down and we will actually have kind of a dry experience. Hopefully, I mean, weather is as it is, but hopefully it's going to be a little bit better. Just behind me we got the Porsche Caymans, and yeah, I just want to see how it's all going to look like in the end. KTM Expos, so let's see how the whole experience is gonna go. And then it was finally time to get onto the track. First, we actually did, I think, the first 35 to 40 minutes learning to drift the car, and we actually had a different course than this one. So it was actually a pretty interesting session because you really learned when to pick up the power, when to push, when to release. It's pretty interesting how this car feels. It essentially feels like a big kart, and it's really difficult to drive it. So no ABS, no TCS, no nothing pretty much. So it's all about you, it's all about the driver, and it's all about how you can really feel this car. And it was actually quite challenging at first because it was wet, and on top of that, this car is only 780 kilos with 300 horsepower. So it was, it's quite interesting to drive it, and when you put the power down, something like this can easily happen. So yeah, this is the first try, and I've actually spun this car around. So I pressed the clutch, it was all good, and I kept on going. So it was not such a big spin, so I decided, in the next couple of minutes I will try to, let's say, adjust my style and eventually adjust the power input. And of course, lines need to be slightly different, especially when it's raining like this. It was incredibly important to make sure that the wheel is straight when you started putting the power, unless of course you want to spin like of course I did in my first attempt. So watching the lines, watching the power output, and eventually watching where we had more grip, which again, it was incredibly difficult to find in these constantly changing conditions. But I started to improve, and I did a 29.840. And if you're wondering why isn't the frame rates matching the total time at the end, so this is 25 frames per second, and it's only counting frames. And then I readjusted and recalculated the time. So the time is a little bit different than what you see in the upper left corner. But my next attempt, as you probably can tell, was a little bit understeer. At first, I tried picking up the power, I really tried accelerating into that third gear and then hitting the braking reference just in front of me. We usually use those cones, and it was a 29.320. Again, it started to improve. I started sliding with the car a little bit more, started putting the power down, and it was actually progressing to be faster and faster and faster. And then eventually I started kind of learning the right lines, getting a little bit more speed. Even 1 kilometer per hour meant that I was going to be quicker through this whole section, which I was. I think I even hit the cone in one of my attempts, but it wasn't that big. So acceleration, once again, straighten up the car, second gear, third. The car slides a little bit. I think I lost a bit of time with that. Second gear, downshifting into this very interesting corner, and the time went down to a 28.920. And in my next attempt, this is where I really started picking up the pace, and this is where I really started kind of finding limits, and I think even the rain slightly eased off, but it wasn't much better than it was before. It was constantly wet, and the conditions, I think it was just about 9 degrees Celsius. The car started sliding, I started drifting, and I think again I lost a bit of time while doing so, accelerating, upshifting into that third gear, using my reference, and then I really started to push, and this was like a big push, like a 28.96. So, and you can see once again on the way out of that corner, the slide, the back really picks up quite easily. So here, the best lap is here, and this is one of the attempts where I was, well, I was actually really pushing, and then I found the optimal line. So through this middle section, once again, left and right, nothing much to do, but here I tried going slightly wider and started to open up the wheel slightly sooner. Nothing too much, a little slide, but then opening up the wheel a little bit more, using slightly more track to upshift into that third gear, and then this was quite a push, to be honest, but the lap was in the end a 28.440. So it was started to be a little bit quicker, but I almost lost the car, to be honest, in this last corner. So I was really pushing in this last one, and it was, as you probably can tell, it was actually quite interesting in here. So in a couple of next attempts, I think the rain really picked up. We had a couple more laps just to do so, and it was, well, it was quite interesting to learn the lines. I really started pushing, I really started to learn the track, and the overall feel of the car was much better. But in the end, it was raining, so unfortunately we couldn't make it onto the GP track. And by the way, this is how I look like. So yeah, it's the end. Unfortunately, we couldn't make it to the racetrack because it's pretty rainy, and in the X-Bow this would be very tricky to handle, and especially if you're driving a car that's worth 80,000 euros, you don't want to crash. So I think for safety reasons it might be better to actually delay it for another time. So unfortunately, we couldn't get onto the racetrack. We only did the driving experience here in this driving center. It was a pretty good one, 2 hours in the driving center, really learning how the car works, really learning when you can pick up the power, when of course it's going to spin and slide. So in the end, I think this is a very, well, very informative session for me, because it's also raining. I could feel the car. It basically feels like a big kart. So you have a lot of power, but it's also very understeer. I don't know how it maybe would perform in normal conditions. We will try it the next time we come here, but you can see a couple of these cars. They're all Caymans, and they're also taxi laps done with these guys. So it's actually a pretty well, it's a pretty interesting one. Definitely worth a try. And the next time I will maybe go with another car, so who knows, KTM X-Bow now, who knows what we will do later. But once again, it's pretty difficult to find something that is actually going to be suited to your driving style, because they're really trying to explain everything from the beginning, and that really takes time. So in the end, I think it's a good one. It's definitely a good experience, and once again, what can I even say? Unfortunately, it's raining, but there we go. So until the next time, guys, see ya.